I've moved the bike out so you can see from the rear. So when we put the rear wheel on and the chain tensioner, I can show you how those go back on. So first thing we want to do, now that we have the wheel assembly back together, is, as you can see, there's a washer here on the axle, and there's a washer here. So what we want to do, the caliper goes to the right hand side. So we want to take the wheel and the axle has flats on it. So we want to slide the wheel temporarily in this position. We're going to have to put the chain on first. So hold this with one hand. And then what we're going to do is we're going to temporarily put the chain on the rear sprocket. And while we're holding this, we're going to come on while the chain is slack. We're going to put the chain on the front sprocket. And the best way to do this is when the axle is all the way forward. Get your chain adjuster. You want to put it on the left side of the axle. You want to get the little U channel. Actually, you want to turn that so that it's pointing inward. You want to put the little end channel on like this. And then you want to get the little nut. And you want to start that nut and this is your chain adjuster. It will tighten up and slide the wheel aft so you can take up the slack in your chain. But when you adjust this, you want to make sure you adjust both sides so that that wheel is basically parallel to the two forks, the rear forks. Now once we have that, we can now take the large washers. We can put the large washers on, and on the right hand side, make sure you get your kickstand. And then you want to put the kickstand. Then we can gently put the nuts on the axle. But we do not want to tighten them just yet. We just want to snug them for the time being, because we're going to have to adjust the chain. Now what you want to do in my case the chain slipped off, so I'm going to put that chain back on. So the chain is now on. What you want to look is, here's your rear forks. You want to make sure the center of the tire, and there's a nut down here for your fender. You want to make sure the spacing of the wheel on either side of the forks is the same. You can stick your finger down there and you can get an eyeball of how the wheel is aligned this way. You want to make sure that wheel is aligned. Make sure your chain stays on the sprocket. Once you get the wheel and the chain on, you want to snug up the axle nuts. With your chain on, you want to run the pedals, and you want to watch the tire and make sure it's spaced evenly between the rear forks. And as you pedal, you don't want to hear any clicking or dragging, because then that would mean that the wheel is out of alignment. So as you turn the pedal, you want a nice smooth motion. You want to make sure the spacing of the tire to the forks is the same on both sides. And with that snug now and the pedals working, then we want to take our 19mm ratchet and we want to snug these up equally, and you're going to have to hold your kickstand and you may have to come back and adjust the kickstand up or down so that the bike will stay on the kickstand. And you want to make sure these axle bolts are really snug. And then again, you want to run the pedals to make sure there's no unevenness, clacking or banging, indicating that the axles are not straight. So once that's straight there, now let me reposition the camera and I'll show you how we can mount the brake calipers. Now you want to get the two little brake caliper spacers, and you notice one is beveled on the outside, one is beveled on the inside. So you want to put the two bevels together, and the smaller washer goes down. So you want to get your brake caliper, and you want to put the bolt with the washer on one side. Then you want to put the small with the bevel side up, and you want to put the large with the bevel side to match that washer. Then you want to take and put the rotor in the slot where the brake pads are. And then we can start tightening the bolts that go in to the caliper bracket. And you want to start these with your finger because you don't want to cross thread these at all. Once you have it started, you can get your Allen wrench and you can take up the slack. Now you don't want to tighten these up yet. You want to get the other caliper bolt on. Again, you want the small one with the bevel facing up, and then you want the larger one with the bevel matching the bevel. And then you want to finger start the caliper bolts, and then we can run them up with the Allen wrench. And then we want to snug them up. Once they're snug on both sides, then we can tighten the caliper. After the caliper has been mounted and tightened, you want to rotate the pedals. Double check that your tire is centered in the fork. You want to make sure your rotor, the calipers are not rubbing too much on the rotor. We'll test the kickstand when we flip the bike right side up. You want to make sure. Then once everything has been adjusted, you want to come in with your 19 millimeter and you really want to tighten the bolts, and then you want to do a double check to make sure everything is lined up with the wheel and the forks. No rubbing on the caliper. We'll test the kickstand. Okay. The last thing you want to do is there is a cable connector here for the motor cable. You want to make sure you run the cable through these little cable mounts, and you may have to pull back some slack on this cable from the battery box so you can fit the cable in through these cable holders. You don't want this motor cable rubbing on any of the moving parts. So when you're testing, make sure this motor wire here is not rubbing on anything and is properly put underneath these cable brackets here. And then you want to make sure the cable is going in through the frame and not a lot of slack. You want it snug. Okay, now we can check and put the battery cover back on. When everything is back together, what you want to do is get your cover, get your charging cable, and you want to reconnect that. And again, it only goes one way. You want to connect the charging cable back up. You want to route all your wires to be inside. And you may have to take and make sure these wires go back into the slot before they go into the frame. Make sure there's enough clearance that this cutout right here will match in. And then we can start snugging up the screws in the battery cover. Okay, we have the battery cover on now. Let's go ahead and flip the bike upside down and double check that the kickstand is in the right position. Notice that the kickstand is not quite adjusted, so what we want to do now is adjust that. We only have to loosen the one side. We want to make sure we get it at the right angle so that the bike is leaning just a tad this way. If the bike is too straight up, it could fall over. So you just want to make sure that the bike is leaning a bit to catch on the kickstand. At this point, we can then tighten up our bolt. Now let's go ahead and lift the rear wheel, and we'll test that we can still engage the motor and that the motor will spin. So I'll leave it like this. I'll lift up the bike, we'll turn it on, and we'll make sure that our bike is running. And as you can see, the bike, the motor is now running. The cover is on. We've adjusted the kickstand. And everything is now finished with our maintenance on removing the rear wheel, the brake rotor, and the motor controller wire assembly. We then fished the wire back through, connected everything up. We made sure all of our wires are routed properly. Okay, hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you next time.